Welcome to the Xojo XDC 2018 recap. I am Paul Lefevre, the Xojo Developer Evangelist. XDC 2018 this year was in Denver, Colorado. And it kicked off our first day with the keynote by Jeff Pearlman. And one of the first things Jeff mentioned is that XDC 2018 was sold out, and actually sold out a couple months in advance for the first time ever. We had 25% of attendees were first-time XDC attendees. And we had people from 12 different countries. We're always excited to see how many people from outside the United States come into the United States for the XDC conference. Jeff then talked about forum growth, and in particular, how since last XDC, the forum has grown over 20% and now has 18,000 members with over 43,000 conversations. And as we've done the last couple times, XDC sessions have been recorded and are available for purchase in the Xojo store. If you attended XDC, you can just log into your Xojo account on the Xojo website, and the session videos will be available there for you to watch or download, do what you want. Jeff then went through the Xojo Design Awards, and we had a few of them. The first one was the Best Developer Tool, given to Bikini Shorts by Bikini Software, a great reporting tool, which is a common feature needed in many business apps. Best Specialty App was Curve 4 by Chromix, and this is an app for calibrating printer colors, and it runs on both Mac and Windows. Best Consumer App was All-in-Off To-Do List by All-in-Off Software, and this is a great to-do list that you can use for projects or just about anything. Lots of details, nice look. Best Mobile App is Packer by Jeremy Leroy. This is an iOS app for making packing lists for trips. In addition to having lists pre-populated with built-in items that are commonly needed, it gives you a weather forecast and can show you nearby attractions and other things. Best Utility App is Server Ranger by Liberty App, and this is an app to track your servers, uptime, response time, that sort of thing. You can have a bunch of servers in here, and you can monitor them to make sure everything is looking good. And this app is fully cross-platform and runs on Mac, Windows, and Linux. Best cross-platform app is LibreOffice by Rothsoft. And this is an app that is used by school systems to track schedules and students and everything related to the overall school system. The app itself runs on Windows and Mac OS. Jeff then talked a bit about Xojo Cloud and reminding people that it is a great set of secure servers for your Xojo web apps with database support for both Postgres and MySQL. Xojo 2018 R1 adds server statistics, so you can just, in the IDE, pop up a window that shows you the server stats for your Xojo Cloud server, and you can choose to look at stats for individual apps that are running on the server. Moving on in the keynote, Jeff talked a bit about Xojo foundational improvements. Since XDC 2016, Xojo has fixed 815 bugs, made 151 changes, and added 64 new features. Windows was improved with Direct2D and DirectWrite support. Linux was updated to use GTK plus 3, which enabled high DPI. And of course now, 64-bit is supported everywhere, and that was made possible by the switch to LLVM 6, which occurred in 2018 R1, adding support to the last part, which was Windows. Jeff then talked about some of the future things we are working on with Xojo, and he described our new way we're going to talk about things, as we're going to be not discussing specific time frames anymore. So we're instead going to be covering using the words priority and important to identify items that are in progress and items that we will intend to work on. Some of the items that we are working on include API 2.0, Web 2.0, Android, and those were some of the high ones he commented on. And out of those, the priority items are Web 2.0, Android, which adds or is built using interops, so that feature is part of Android. The updates to the IDE user interface, and API 2.0. So these are items that we have tagged as priority because we are actively working on them. And then for important items, right now, the ability to make plugins using Xojo is still an important item for us. And we will plan for that at some point in the future. And with the wrap up to the keynote, we started moving into general sessions, and the first session started by talking a bit about Android. And the Android SDK is mapped to Xojo using interops, which interops you can kind of think as super declares. They provide a way for you to call directly into OS APIs, but they're essentially pre-built with data types mapped properly so that they're much easier to use. To enable Android support, our LLVM compiler suite had to be updated to support something called position-independent executables. And without getting into too many details, this essentially is an executable that can run anywhere in memory and is something that is required by Android. But many other operating systems also do support it. So once this is available in Android, it'll likely roll out to other platforms as well. There'll also be some built-in support to handle the bridge between the Android virtual machines and Xojo native code. Xojo Android apps will be native code. That's what Xojo does. It builds native code apps. But the Android OS and most of its design is built around the Android virtual machine. So there does need to be some way for a native code app to interact with that. And we're going to have all that kind of built in behind the scenes so that it just works. People don't have to worry about it, but that is a component of the Android stuff that we are working on. And then with these pieces in place, the Android framework is built essentially on top of all that. And that's the part that you typically interact with. You know, that's the Xojo code and frameworks that you already know how to use. And then the last component of Android is the actual integration into the IDE, which, you know, layout editor and project structure and stuff like that. So what are the requirements for Android? You're going to need to do your Android development on a Mac or Windows computer. Linux will not initially be supported. May in the future. You also need to have Android Studio installed so that you can get the Android emulator for testing and other debug tools that are needed in order to build your apps. And Xojo at this point is targeting the Android 8.1 SDK, which allows you to build apps for Android 4.4 and later. The second half of this session covered API 2.0, which is essentially a return to the classic framework. So what we have done is we've created some updated naming guidelines that are within themselves consistent and clearer and all that good stuff. And by returning to the classic framework, this will allow your code to be consistent across all platforms. And all this stuff will, of course, be encapsulated with the clearer naming and examples and documentation to make it easier to work with. And what this all means is that the Xojo namespace framework that was introduced back with iOS a few years ago will be deprecated. And that also means that the text and auto data types will also be deprecated. The next session was on Web 2.0, which is a significant update to the web framework and how it's built. One of the first main changes is that it will now be using an HTTP 1.1 compliant server. There will be much improved responsiveness in your Xojo web apps. And the overall framework has been modernized with new and updated controls that are going to be, or that are built using Bootstrap and Fuel UX. Much DOM processing is now done within the browser to eliminate network round trips. And things are built on top of jQuery for more functionality. There'll be improved server connection monitoring. As you probably know, Xojo web apps do require a connection to the web server in order to operate, and things will be a little smarter now. Should there be any connection interruptions, your app won't necessarily disappear or terminate. There'll be improved browser history handling so that essentially you can now use the back and forward buttons in your apps and have them work as users would expect. You'll be able to theme your apps using Bootstrap themes. We're going to have 3 different types of layouts that are available for your web apps. Fixed layouts are essentially what you have now. Controls appear where you put them on the page. We're also going to be adding auto layout, so that controls and other things can reposition themselves based on other controls or things that are on the page. And then a fluid layout that is more based on views and will allow things to essentially reorganize based on the size of where the web app is displayed. There'll be a variety of new controls available in Web 2.0. You can see a list here. Charting, audio player, date picker, page and tab panels, tree view, all stuff that I'm sure people will find useful. And the existing controls will all be there, of course, and several are going to be improved, including file uploader, canvas, menu item, etc. Your projects will be forward compatible, so you won't have to rewrite them or anything like that. You'll be able to open existing web projects and they'll be updated to work with Web 2.0, but once you do that, you won't be able to go backwards. Another thing that we've have in place is something called browser consistency. So rather than requiring specific versions of browsers, you need this version of Chrome or this version of Safari or whatnot, we now will be asking the browsers what features they support, and then the Xojo Web Framework will respond accordingly. So that means essentially that your app will run on pretty much any browser as long as it has the features that your web app needs. The framework for Web 2.0 is written using TypeScript. It's essentially a static typed version of JavaScript. The Web SDK will, of course, be updated to give you instructions for how you can integrate your own controls and other things into the Web 2.0 framework. And one thing that is important to point out that is if you have custom code that is directly manipulating the DOM in your current web applications, well, the DOM's not likely, but has changed a bit for Web 2.0, so those sort of things will need to be revisited because they're not likely to continue working as is. So those were the main sessions for the first day, just in the morning. There are many more sessions in the afternoon, including the wonderful world of Windows, where William covered some of the changes that have been coming down for Windows, including the improvements to Flickr and other things. I covered some advanced features of SQLite, such as in-memory databases and triggers. Norman covered some of the new features that have appeared in the IDE over the last year or so. And then that wrapped up the first day. And then the whole crew, after a short break, trekked across town a few blocks over to the Viewhouse Pub, which was right next to Coors Field, where the Colorado Rockies play. Fortunately, the Rockies were not playing at the time. They had played earlier in the day. But this was a fun place, lots of food and fun games and things for everyone to play outside. Day 2 of the conference had 14 sessions on a wide variety of topics, which you can see here. I'm not going to name them all, but you can see they jump all over the place. Stuff on LVM and databases, reporting. Many topics here, of course, were done by attendees. And in the evening, we walked just a couple blocks from the hotel to the Bubba Gump Shrimp Company for a fun evening event and food. And if you're unaware, Bubba Gump Shrimp is a kind of a fictional thing that was in the Forrest Gump movie and somehow got turned into a real restaurant, so go figure. Day 3 of the conference had 10 sessions. Again, on a variety of topics. Object-oriented programming, iOS, more popular. And then after the main sessions wrapped up, we always have at the end of the conference what we call our feedback session, where everyone gets to offer what worked well for them at the conference, suggestions for next conferences, general feedback that we all note. And then something new we did this year is something we called the Last Hurrah, which is essentially a last chance for everyone to just mingle and hang out before the conference wraps up. And this was a great opportunity for people to make their final connections, exchange contact information, talk to people they hadn't yet had a chance to talk with, all that sort of fun stuff. And that's it. Conference was over. Just like that. It always goes by very, very quickly. And for those of you that weren't there, a short round of pictures to help make you feel like you were there. We also announced next year's XDC, XDC 2019. It will be in Miami, Florida at the Marriott Biscayne Bay, right on the ocean. And it'll be a little less than a year from now, May 1st through May 3rd, 2019. We've secured a great rate for the hotel rooms at $149 a night, and this rate is available for 3 days before the conference and 3 days after for people that want to kind of turn it into a little mini vacation. The first 50 registrations to XDC 2019 save $200 on the registration cost. And we already had quite a few people register, so there's only 25 remaining at this discounted rate. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this brief recap of XDC 2018 and you are able to maybe attend XDC 2019. If you have any questions or comments, you can always reach me via email, paul@xojo.com, or on Twitter. Have a great day, everyone.